Reason and Revolution, Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory by Herbert Marcuse. Quotes: Reason and Revolution, Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory by Herbert Marcuse is a comprehensive analysis of the influence of Hegelian philosophy on the development of social theory, especially its connection to Marxism and modern political movements. Marcuse explores how Hegel's dialectical approach laid the groundwork for a critical understanding of society, power structures, and human liberation. He traces the transformation of Hegel's ideas through the rise of Marxism and contrasts Hegelian rationalism with both positivism and fascist thought. This book highlights how the philosophical ideas of freedom, reason, and history have impacted social theory and provided a foundation for the critique of existing societal structures, particularly during times of revolution and counter-revolution. Quote 1. German idealism has been called the theory of the French Revolution. This quote encapsulates the idea that the philosophical developments during the German Enlightenment were closely linked to the societal upheavals of the French Revolution. The German idealists responded to the revolution not by simply critiquing it, but by integrating its principles into their philosophical frameworks, suggesting a significant interplay between social movements and intellectual thought. Quote 2. The French Revolution not only abolished feudal absolutism, replacing it with the economic and political system of the middle class, but it completed what the German Reformation had begun, emancipating the individual as a self-reliant master of his life. This statement highlights the revolutionary shift in societal structures that empowered individuals. It implies that the revolution not only transformed political systems, but also laid the groundwork for individual autonomy, mirroring the earlier spiritual emancipation fostered by the German Reformation. Quote 3. Hegel's idea of reason has retained, though in an idealistic form, the material strivings for a free and rational order of life. This emphasizes that Hegel's conception of reason is deeply intertwined with the material realities and aspirations of society. It suggests that reason is not merely an abstract philosophical concept, but is rooted in the tangible struggles for freedom and rational organization within the social context. Quote 4. Man's existence centers in his head, i.e. in thought, inspired by which he builds up the world of reality. This quote underscores the fundamental role of thought in shaping reality. It implies that human consciousness and reasoning are pivotal in constructing social and political orders, suggesting a shift from a world governed by external authorities to one guided by human rationality. Quote 5. Nothing is reason that is not the result of thinking. This assertion asserts the necessity of critical thought in the formulation of reason. It conveys the idea that mere acceptance of existing conditions without reflection does not lead to genuine understanding or reason, emphasizing the importance of active engagement with reality. Quote 6. The principle of the French Revolution asserted that thought ought to govern reality. Here, the quote crystallizes the revolutionary ideal that rational thought should dictate societal structures and norms. It reflects Hegel's belief that philosophical ideas must translate into actual governance and social organization, representing a profound shift in how individuals relate to their world. Quote 7. The term that designates reason as history is mind, Geist, which denotes the historical world viewed in relation to the rational progress of humanity. This definition positions Geist as a key concept in understanding how reason evolves over time within human history. It signifies that history is not just a series of events, but a narrative of human rationality and development, framing historical progress as a manifestation of the unfolding of reason. Quote 8. Reality changes its meaning within the conceptual structure of Hegel's system. This statement indicates that Hegel's philosophy redefines what is considered real based on its alignment with reason. It implies a transformative view of reality, where genuine existence is contingent upon adherence to rational principles, thereby challenging conventional notions of reality. Quote 9. Hegel's concept of reason thus has a distinctly critical and polemic character. This highlights the confrontational nature of Hegel's philosophy, which critiques existing societal norms and structures. It suggests that Hegel's reason is inherently revolutionary, aiming to challenge and dismantle accepted forms of oppression and inequality. Quote 10. The educated classes isolated themselves from practical affairs and, thus rendering themselves impotent to apply their reason to the reshaping of society. This quote critiques the detachment of intellectuals from the realities of social life, suggesting that their withdrawal from practical engagement rendered their philosophical insights ineffective in fostering societal change. It points to a disconnect between thought and action within the educated elite. Quote 11. Hegel's system is the last great expression of this cultural idealism. This asserts that Hegel's philosophy represents a culmination of the idealistic tradition, wherein thought seeks to transcend and reconcile with reality. It acknowledges Hegel's ambition to synthesize intellectual ideals with the material conditions of existence, marking a critical moment in the evolution of philosophical thought. Quote 12. Marx rests his theories on the assumption that the labor process determines the totality of human existence, and thus gives to society its basic pattern. This quote establishes a foundational premise in Marx's thought, asserting that the nature of labor is integral to shaping societal structures and dynamics. It highlights the significance of labor, not merely as a means of production, but as a determinant of human existence and social organization, suggesting that understanding labor is essential for understanding society itself. Quote 13. In the prevailing social system, labor produces commodities. This statement succinctly describes the primary function of labor within capitalist systems: the production of commodities for exchange rather than direct fulfillment of needs. It emphasizes the transformation of labor into a commodity-producing process, which is a central theme in Marx's critique of capitalism. Quote 14. All commodities are products of human labor. They are materialized, vergegenständlichte labor. This quote underscores the idea that commodities are not merely physical objects, but rather embodiments of human labor. It points to the intrinsic link between labor and the value of commodities, reinforcing the notion that labor is the source of all economic value in a commodity-driven society. Quote 15. If all specificity of labor is abstracted, one act of labor is distinguished from another only by its duration. This statement reflects Marx's analysis of labor as a quantifiable unit, where the qualitative differences of various labor forms are reduced to mere time measurements. It emphasizes the abstraction of labor in capitalist production, where the unique qualities of different labor types become secondary to their quantitative assessment. Quote 16. Marx thus comes to the fact that the phenomenon of labor covers two entirely different kinds of labor: concrete specific labor, correlative to concrete specific use values, and abstract universal labor as expressed in the respective exchange values of commodities. This distinction is pivotal in Marx's theory, revealing that labor has both a specific and an abstract dimension. It illustrates how labor is not just about producing tangible goods, concrete labor, but also involves a broader economic function that contributes to the creation of value, abstract labor, thus deepening the understanding of economic interactions. Quote 17. His distinction between concrete and abstract labor allows him insights to which the conceptual apparatus of classical political economy was necessarily blind. This highlights the innovative nature of Marx's labor theory, suggesting that traditional economic theories failed to account for the complexities of labor. It implies that Marx's approach provides a clearer framework for analyzing economic value and labor's role in commodity production, challenging established economic doctrines. Quote 18. The law of value would continue to operate as a blind mechanism outside the conscious control of individuals. This quote critiques the way capitalist systems function, indicating that the law of value operates independently of individual agency. It implies that social and economic interactions are governed by impersonal market forces that disregard personal intentions, leading to a disconnect between individual actions and collective needs. Quote 19. The need for commodities on the market, the demand, differs quantitatively from the actual social need. This statement points out the discrepancy between market demand and genuine social needs, suggesting that consumer desires are shaped by market conditions rather than authentic human necessities. It reveals a critical perspective on how capitalism distorts human needs through the lens of exchange values and market dynamics. Quote 20. The process in which labor power becomes an abstract quantitative unit characterizes a specifically social form of labor, to be distinguished from that form which is the natural condition of human existence. This quote emphasizes the transformation of labor under capitalism into a social construct, separating it from its natural context. It indicates that capitalist labor practices impose a framework that abstracts labor from its organic roots, altering the relationship between human beings and their productive activities. Quote 21. The introduction of the category of use value was the introduction of a forgotten factor. This highlights the importance of reintroducing use value into economic discussions, which classical political economy often overlooked. It underscores Marx's argument that recognizing use value is essential for understanding the true nature of commodities and their relationship to human needs, thereby challenging the dominant economic narratives of his time. Quote 22. Every single concept in the Marxian theory has a materially different foundation, just as the new theory has a new conceptual structure and framework that cannot be derived from preceding theories. This statement emphasizes the originality of Marx's thought, asserting that his concepts are grounded in material conditions rather than philosophical abstractions. It indicates that Marx's theoretical framework emerges from a distinct analysis of social and economic realities that break from the traditions established by his predecessors. Quote 23. As a first approach to the problem, we may say that in Hegel's system all categories terminate in the existing order, while in Marx's they refer to the negation of this order. This quote contrasts the philosophical conclusions of Hegel with those of Marx. It implies that Hegel's categories reinforce the status quo, whereas Marx's concepts are inherently critical and aimed at transcending and transforming the existing social order, setting the stage for revolutionary change. Quote 24. Marx lays particular stress on the decisive contributions of Hegel's concept of labor. This highlights Marx's acknowledgement of Hegel's insights regarding labor as central to understanding social dynamics. It suggests that while Marx critiques Hegel, he also builds upon Hegel's ideas about labor's role in shaping society and consciousness, thus integrating elements of Hegelian thought into his own framework. Quote 25. The realization of reason therefore implies the overcoming of this estrangement, the establishment of a condition in which the subject knows and possesses itself in all its objects. This statement articulates the goal of Marx's critique, to resolve the alienation inherent in capitalist labor practices. It implies that true freedom and reason can only be achieved when individuals reclaim their relationship with their labor and the products of that labor, moving toward a society where human potential is fully realized. Quote 26. Marx said there was such an element, the proletariat. This quote identifies the proletariat as a critical factor that undermines Hegel's claims about the realization of reason within existing society. It underscores the idea that the existence of the working class, with its struggles and suffering, serves as evidence that the ideals of freedom and reason have not been actualized in the social order. Quote 27. The reality of reason, right, and freedom then turns into the reality of falsehood, injustice, and bondage. This powerful statement critiques the disconnect between the philosophical ideals espoused by Hegel and the actual conditions experienced by the proletariat. It suggests that the supposed realization of reason in society is instead marked by oppression and inequality, indicating a profound failure of the existing social structures. Quote 28. History and social reality themselves thus negate philosophy. This assertion highlights a significant turning point in Marx's thought, suggesting that the lived experiences of individuals and the contradictions within society serve to challenge and invalidate abstract philosophical discourse. It implies that philosophy must be grounded in the realities of social practice to maintain its relevance and truth. Quote 29. The critique of society cannot be carried through by philosophical doctrine, but becomes the task of socio-historical practice. This statement emphasizes that real change and understanding must come from active engagement with social conditions rather than through philosophical speculation. It marks a shift toward practical action and historical analysis as the means of enacting societal transformation, reflecting Marx's commitment to praxis. Quote 30. The deep surge of conviction that philosophy had come to an end colored the first decades after Hegel's death. This quote reflects the sentiment prevalent among thinkers following Hegel, suggesting a transformative moment in intellectual history where traditional philosophical inquiry was deemed obsolete. It indicates a shift toward concrete human experiences and material realities as the primary focus for understanding truth and promoting emancipation. Quote 31. Philosophical structures had hitherto domiciled the truth, setting it apart from the historical struggle of men. This statement critiques previous philosophical traditions for their detachment from real-life struggles. It implies that philosophy had often operated in an abstract realm, failing to address the practical concerns of human existence, thus necessitating a shift to a more grounded approach that emphasizes the social and material conditions of life. Quote 32. Hegel's successors accordingly exalted the negation of philosophy as the realization of God, through the deification of man. This quote underscores how thinkers after Hegel reinterpreted the negation of traditional philosophy as a means to achieve human empowerment and transformation. It indicates a movement towards secular humanism, where the divine is replaced with an emphasis on human potential and agency in shaping society. Quote 33. Kierkegaard's individualistic interpretation of the negation of philosophy inevitably developed a fierce opposition to Western rationalism. This highlights Kierkegaard's critique of rationalism, asserting that his focus on individual experience and subjectivity challenges the universalist claims of rationalist philosophy. It suggests that his approach prioritizes personal existence and ethical choices over abstract reason, positioning the individual as central to the search for truth. Quote 34. Rationalism was essentially universalistic, as we have shown, with reason resident in the thinking ego and in the objective mind. This statement critiques the foundational assumptions of rationalism, emphasizing its focus on universal truths detached from individual experiences. It implies that such an approach overlooks the complexities of human life, leading to a disconnect between philosophical ideals and the actual needs of individuals. Quote 35. Truth lies only in action and can be experienced only through action. This quote emphasizes Kierkegaard's belief that genuine truth is not found in abstract knowledge, but in concrete actions. It suggests that individuals must engage with their circumstances and make decisions that reflect their lived experiences, positioning action as the key to understanding reality. Quote 36. Kierkegaard knew that in this society, such a way of life involved incessant struggle and ultimate humiliation and defeat. This reflects Kierkegaard's recognition of the challenges faced by individuals striving for authenticity within an oppressive societal framework. It suggests that achieving a meaningful existence requires confronting significant obstacles, highlighting the tension between personal aspiration and social constraints. Quote 37. Kierkegaard's attack on abstract thought led him to assail certain universal concepts that uphold the essential equality and dignity of man. This statement critiques Kierkegaard's rejection of universal principles, which could potentially undermine the ideals of equality and dignity. It implies that his individualistic focus risks isolating the individual from broader social contexts and shared values that are crucial for collective human rights. Quote 38. The idea of socialism and community cannot save this age. This quote indicates Kierkegaard's skepticism toward socialism as a solution for contemporary societal issues. It suggests that he views socialist ideas as potentially dehumanizing, reducing individuals to mere components of a collective, rather than recognizing their unique qualities and needs. Quote 39. The anti-rationalist attack on universals becomes increasingly important in the subsequent development of European thought. This statement acknowledges the growing significance of critiques against universalist reasoning in the evolution of European philosophy. It indicates a shift towards recognizing particularities and individual experiences as valid, potentially leading to a re-examination of social norms and institutions based on collective human experiences. Quote 40. The concept of reason was connected with advanced ideas, like the essential equality of men, the rule of law, the standard of rationality in state and society. This quote highlights the foundational relationship between the concept of reason and the principles that underpin modern liberal societies. It suggests that reason is not merely an abstract philosophical idea, but is intimately tied to the ideals of equality, justice, and rational governance that shape social institutions. Quote 41. Feuerbach starts with the fact Kierkegaard had failed to recognize, namely, that in the present age, the human content of religion can be preserved only by abandoning the religious, otherworldly form. This statement emphasizes Feuerbach's critique of religion, arguing that its true human essence can only be realized by moving away from supernatural beliefs. It reflects a shift towards a more human-centered philosophy, suggesting that the transformation of religion into a secular humanist framework is necessary for genuine human emancipation. Quote 42. The realization of religion requires its negation. This succinct quote encapsulates Feuerbach's perspective that the full realization of religious values must involve rejecting their traditional forms. It suggests that to achieve a truly meaningful existence grounded in human needs and experiences, one must move beyond the constraints of religious dogma. Quote 43. The happiness he sought in heaven and in pure thought can now be satisfied on earth. This quote illustrates the transition from seeking fulfillment in the afterlife or abstract ideals to finding it in tangible earthly existence. It implies that true happiness and satisfaction are attainable through human action and social change, rather than through otherworldly promises. Quote 44. Philosophy must thus begin with being, not Hegel's abstract being as such, but with being in the concrete, that is, with nature. This statement critiques Hegel's idealism, asserting that philosophy should focus on concrete realities rather than abstract concepts. It emphasizes the importance of grounding philosophical inquiry in the material world and the conditions of human existence, setting the stage for a more pragmatic approach to philosophy. Quote 45. The true relation of thought to being is this: being is subject, thought is predicate. This quote posits that existence, being, precedes and informs thought, reversing the traditional idealist view that places thought above reality. It asserts that understanding must start with the material world, suggesting that human thought is shaped by the concrete conditions of life. Quote 46. Feuerbach joins the great tradition of materialist philosophers who could see that the idealistic solutions were illusory. This statement highlights Feuerbach's alignment with materialist philosophy, indicating that he recognizes the limitations of idealism in addressing human needs. It implies that a materialist perspective offers a more realistic and practical approach to understanding and improving the human condition. Quote 47. Despite all historical progress, Feuerbach cries out, "Man is still in need," and the pervasive fact philosophy encounters is suffering. This quote underscores the persistent human struggles that philosophy must confront, suggesting that despite advancements, fundamental needs and suffering remain central to human existence. It highlights a critical view of philosophical discourse that neglects these realities. Quote 48. Thought is preceded by suffering. This powerful assertion suggests that human experiences of suffering shape and inform thought. It implies that understanding and philosophy must begin with the acknowledgement of human pain and hardship, positioning these experiences as foundational to any meaningful inquiry into existence. Quote 49. Feuerbach's conception of the ego reverses the traditional conception of it, which motivated modern philosophy since Descartes. This statement indicates Feuerbach's departure from Cartesian thought by framing the ego as primarily receptive rather than active. It suggests that human consciousness is shaped by external realities and experiences, challenging the notion of a self-determining, rational subject. Quote 50. The study of the labor process is, in the last analysis, absolutely necessary in order to discover the conditions for realizing reason and freedom in the real sense. This quote emphasizes the critical role of labor in understanding human existence and achieving true freedom. It suggests that an analysis of labor practices is essential for uncovering the social and economic conditions necessary for genuine rationality and liberation. Marx's quote 51 writings between 1844 and 1846 treat the form of labor in modern society as constituting the total alienation of man. This quote identifies the central theme in Marx's critique of labor under capitalism, which he views as a process of alienation that estranges individuals from their work and from each other. It suggests that the modern labor system disconnects workers from the products of their labor, leading to a fundamental loss of humanity and self-identity. Quote 52. The social division of labor takes place entirely according to the laws of capitalist commodity production. This statement emphasizes that the organization of labor in capitalist societies is dictated by economic forces rather than by the needs or talents of individuals. It implies that the capitalist system shapes labor relationships in a way that prioritizes profit over human welfare, reinforcing the alienation of workers. Quote 53. The more the worker produces, the greater the power of capital becomes, and the smaller the worker's own means for appropriating his products. This quote highlights the paradox of capitalism, where increased productivity leads to greater wealth for capitalists while simultaneously diminishing the worker's share and agency. It underscores the exploitative nature of the capitalist system, where labor creates value that benefits the owners of capital rather than the workers themselves. Quote 54. The object which labor produces is encountered as an alien entity, a force that has become independent of its producer. This statement captures the essence of alienation in the labor process, where the products of labor are viewed as separate and dominating forces in the worker's life. It implies that instead of empowering individuals, labor creates objects that control and dictate the worker's existence, leading to a sense of powerlessness. Quote 55. Labor thus becomes the victim of a power it has itself created. This quote emphasizes the ironic situation where workers, through their labor, produce systems and commodities that ultimately control and oppress them. It suggests that labor, meant to be a source of human fulfillment, instead contributes to the worker's subjugation under capitalist structures. Quote 56. With this question, the Marxian theory leaves the plane of political economy. This statement indicates a shift in Marx's focus from mere economic analysis to a deeper understanding of how economic relations affect human existence. It implies that Marx's critique transcends traditional political economy by exploring the broader implications of labor and alienation for human freedom and dignity. Quote 57. Far from being a mere economic activity, Labor is the existential activity of man, his free, conscious activity, not a means for maintaining his life, but for developing his universal nature. This quote asserts that labor should be understood not only as a means of survival, but as a fundamental expression of human identity and potential. It emphasizes the idea that labor is central to self-actualization and the realization of one's humanity, contrasting sharply with its alienated form in capitalist society. Quote 58. The new categories will evaluate the economic reality with a view to what it has made of man, of his faculties, powers, and needs. This statement highlights the need for a re-evaluation of economic systems based on their impact on human life and potential. It suggests that economic categories should reflect their effects on individuals, emphasizing a human-centered approach to understanding economic relationships. Quote 59. Man is free only if all men are free and exist as universal beings. This quote underscores the interconnectedness of individual freedom with collective liberation. It implies that true freedom cannot be realized in isolation. Rather, it requires a societal framework where all individuals can thrive and fulfill their potential together. Quote 60. The Genenser system, as it is called, is Hegel's first complete system, consisting of a logic, a metaphysic, philosophy of nature, and philosophy of mind. This quote outlines the comprehensive structure of Hegel's first philosophical system developed during his time at the University of Jena. It emphasizes the interconnectedness of different branches of philosophy in his thought, suggesting that Hegel's approach integrates logic, metaphysics, and the study of nature and mind into a cohesive framework. Quote 61. Hegel's logic expounds the structure of being as such, that is, the most general forms of being. This statement indicates that Hegel's logic is concerned with understanding the fundamental categories that define existence. It suggests that Hegel aims to uncover the essential structures that underpin reality, making it a critical exploration of ontology. Quote 62. Hegel's logic deals primarily with the forms and types of being as comprehended by thought. This quote highlights Hegel's belief in the unity of thought and being, indicating that understanding reality involves comprehending how thoughts represent the structures of existence. It points to the significance of thought in shaping our understanding of the world around us. Quote 63. Hegel rejected Kant's idealism on the ground that it assumed the existence of things in themselves apart from phenomena. This statement critiques Kant's philosophy by emphasizing Hegel's position that reality and thought are inherently connected. It suggests that Hegel seeks to bridge the gap that Kant identified between the world as we perceive it and the underlying reality, proposing a more integrated understanding of existence. Quote 64. The truth of the materialist thesis is thus to be fulfilled in its negation. This quote encapsulates the dialectical nature of Hegel's and Marx's philosophies, suggesting that true understanding and freedom arise through the process of overcoming existing conditions. It implies that the contradictions inherent in the materialist perspective must be addressed to reveal deeper truths. Quote 65. Marx emphasizes time and again that his materialistic starting point is forced upon him by the materialistic quality of the society he analyzes. This statement reflects Marx's commitment to a materialist analysis of society, indicating that his theories are grounded in the realities of economic and social conditions. It underscores the importance of understanding material circumstances in shaping human existence and consciousness. Quote 66. The more the worker produces, the poorer he himself becomes. This quote highlights the paradox of capitalist labor, where increased productivity leads to greater wealth for capitalists while diminishing the worker's economic standing. It underscores the exploitative nature of capitalism and its impact on the working class. Quote 67. The realization of labor appears as its opposite, the negation of the laborer. This statement encapsulates the essence of alienation in labor, indicating that instead of empowering the worker, the labor process under capitalism leads to their disempowerment and estrangement from the fruits of their work. It emphasizes the fundamental contradiction within capitalist production. Quote 68. Labor becomes the victim of a power it has itself created. This quote reflects the irony in capitalist production, where the very labor that creates wealth also subjugates the laborer. It suggests that workers find themselves trapped in a system they contribute to, highlighting the dynamics of exploitation inherent in capitalism. Quote 69. The totality of economic relations, laws, and institutions may not be treated simply as an isolated objective cluster of facts, but as making up a historical form within which men carry on their lives. This statement emphasizes the need to view economic relations as part of a broader historical context, rather than as isolated phenomena. It suggests that understanding human existence requires examining the social and historical processes that shape economic systems and relations. Quote 70. For this reason, thought is more real than its objects. This quote highlights Hegel's belief in the primacy of thought over physical reality. It suggests that the way we comprehend and understand reality through thought gives it a deeper significance than the objects themselves, implying that our understanding shapes the essence of existence. Quote 71. The world of man develops, Hegel says, in a series of integrations of opposites. This statement reflects Hegel's dialectical method, where progress occurs through the reconciliation of opposing forces. It suggests that human history is characterized by conflict and resolution, leading to higher forms of understanding and societal organization. Quote 72. Language is the medium in which the first integration between subject and object takes place. This quote emphasizes the crucial role of language in forming human consciousness and social relations. It indicates that language not only facilitates communication, but also serves as a foundation for individuality and community, shaping how people relate to each other and to the world. Quote 73. The family, however, finds itself and its property among other property-owning families. This statement illustrates the emergence of social dynamics within a community, where families compete and interact based on their property ownership. It suggests that the family unit serves as a fundamental building block for broader social relations, paving the way for more complex societal structures. Quote 74. The abolition of private property will do away with all this once and for all. This statement asserts that eliminating private property is a transformative step toward achieving a just society. It suggests that private property is a source of conflict and inequality, and its abolition would pave the way for a more equitable distribution of resources and collective ownership. Quote 75. The individual becomes the actual subject of history, in such a way that he is himself the universal and manifests the universal essence of man. This quote emphasizes the role of individuals in shaping history, indicating that true progress involves recognizing one's universal qualities. It suggests that individual actions and identities contribute to a collective human experience, ultimately leading to a more profound understanding of humanity. Quote 76. Marx's analysis of labor under capitalism is thus quite deep-seated, going further than the structure of economic relationships to the actual human content. This statement reflects Marx's approach to economic analysis, highlighting that his critique goes beyond surface-level economic structures to examine the deeper implications for human existence. It suggests that understanding labor involves recognizing its impact on human identity and social relations. Quote 77. The mode of labor perverts all human faculties. Accumulation of wealth intensifies poverty, and technological progress leads to the rule of dead matter over the human world. This quote captures Marx's critical perspective on capitalism, indicating that the system not only exploits labor, but also dehumanizes individuals. It suggests that technological advancements, rather than liberating humanity, can entrench poverty and reinforce the dominance of material conditions over human agency. Quote 78. economic relations only seem to be objective because of the character of commodity production. This statement challenges the perception of economic relations as neutral or natural, asserting that they are shaped by the structures of commodity production. It suggests that a deeper understanding of these relations reveals their inherently social and historical character, which must be critically examined. Quote 79. The assurance that a relation or a performance is secured by a contract, and that the contract will be kept under all circumstances alone, makes the relations and performances in a commodity-producing society calculable and rational. This quote emphasizes the importance of contracts in capitalist societies, suggesting that they provide a framework for predictable interactions among individuals. It indicates that the reliability of contracts is essential for maintaining social order and enabling rational economic activities. Quote 80. The universal is the substance of the contract. This statement highlights Hegel's view that contracts embody universal principles that govern social relations. It implies that contracts are not just private agreements, but represent broader societal norms that connect individuals to the collective good. Quote 81. If I break my word, I break the very contract of society and not only hurt a particular person, but the community. This quote underscores the social responsibility tied to individual actions, indicating that personal commitments are also linked to the broader fabric of society. It suggests that personal integrity and trust are foundational to the well-being of the community as a whole. Quote 82. The individual can be free only as a political being. This statement reflects Hegel's belief that true freedom is realized through participation in the political sphere. It implies that individual autonomy is deeply connected to one's role within a community and the state, emphasizing the social dimensions of freedom. Quote 83. The struggle for mutual recognition of their rights. This quote encapsulates the conflict inherent in social relationships, where individuals seek acknowledgement of their rights from one another. It suggests that recognition is essential for establishing a just society and highlights the interplay between individuality and communal identity. Quote 84. Hegel repudiates the theory of the social contract on the ground that it assumes that the general will is operative in the isolated individuals prior to their entry into the state. This statement critiques the social contract theory by arguing that the idea of a general will does not predate the formation of the state. It implies that the collective will emerges from historical processes rather than being an inherent quality of individuals. Quote 85. The general will is the result and not the origin of the state. This quote reinforces Hegel's argument that collective governance and shared values arise from social development rather than existing prior to it. It suggests that the formation of the state is a historical process shaped by conflicts and resolutions among individuals. Quote 86. Tyranny is the earliest and the lowest. Hereditary monarchy is the highest form. This statement outlines Hegel's hierarchy of state forms, positioning tyranny as a primitive stage and hereditary monarchy as a more advanced system. It indicates that Hegel views the evolution of state forms as a progression toward greater rationality and organization. Quote 87. The individual satisfies his needs by his labor, but not by the particular product of his labor. The latter, to fill his needs, has to become something other than it is. This quote suggests that in a capitalist system, the products of labor must transform into commodities to be useful. It highlights the alienation of labor, where the direct relationship between the worker and the product is obscured by the demands of the market. Quote 88. The more mechanized labor becomes, the less value it has, and the more the individual must toil. This statement critiques the dehumanizing effects of mechanization in labor. It implies that increased productivity through machinery leads to the commodification of labor, resulting in workers being further exploited and their contributions diminished. Quote 89. Hegel wrote the Phenomenology of Mind in 1806 in Jena while the Napoleonic armies were approaching that city. He finished it as the Battle of Jena sealed the fate of Prussia and enthroned the heir of the French Revolution over the powerless remnants of the old German Reich. Hegel's writing of the phenomenology of mind during the tumultuous period of the Napoleonic Wars underlines the immediate historical context that influenced his philosophical ideas. His work reflects a critical engagement with the era's upheavals, particularly the outcomes of the French Revolution, which he saw not as ushering in freedom, but a new form of despotism. This perspective is crucial in understanding Hegel's development of the dialectical method, which emphasizes the progression and resolution of contradictions through history. Quote 90. Hegel saw that the result of the French Revolution was not the realization of freedom, but the establishment of a new despotism. This quote captures Hegel's critical analysis of the French Revolution, which he believed failed to achieve true freedom, instead leading to another form of authoritarian control. This interpretation is vital for understanding his philosophy of history, where he proposes that freedom can only be achieved through the self-realizing activities of the state rather than through individual actions against it. This sets the stage for his later emphasis on the role of the state in the development of ethical life and the realization of freedom. Quote 91. The state alone can provide emancipation, though it cannot provide perfect truth and perfect freedom. In this statement, Hegel outlines the limitations and capabilities of the state in the context of human emancipation. He acknowledges the state's essential role in facilitating individual emancipation, but also recognizes its inherent inability to realize perfect truth and freedom. This dichotomy is crucial for understanding Hegel's philosophical exploration of the relationship between the individual and the state, suggesting a complex interplay where the state is both a facilitator and a barrier to complete freedom. Quote 92. Freedom and reason are made activities of the pure mind and do not require a definite social and political order as a precondition, but are compatible with the already existing state. This quote reflects Hegel's adaptation of his philosophical views to accommodate the prevailing political conditions of his time. By detaching freedom and reason from specific social and political requirements, Hegel allows for a form of philosophical reconciliation with existing structures. This maneuver demonstrates his pragmatic approach to philosophy, wherein abstract ideals like freedom and reason can be pursued within the constraints of existing societal frameworks without necessitating revolutionary change. Quote 93. Common sense resents such a destruction of its truth, and claims that it can indicate the exact particular here and now it means. In addressing the confrontation between philosophical inquiry and common sense, Hegel reveals the tension inherent in moving from everyday experience to a philosophical understanding of reality. This quote highlights Hegel's critical stance towards common sense, which often resists philosophical challenges to its assumptions about reality, such as the fixed nature of time and space. Quote 94. The dialectic process involved in sense certainty is nothing else than the mere history of its process of its experience, and sense certainty itself is nothing else than simply this history. Here, Hegel elucidates the dynamic and historical nature of sense certainty, suggesting that what we take for granted as immediate knowledge is actually a process that unfolds over time. This historical unfolding reveals the inherent limitations and transformations within what is presumed to be direct sensory knowledge, emphasizing the evolution of understanding as an integral aspect of the dialectic process. Quote 95. The objects of perception are things, Dinge, and things remain identical in the changes of here and now. Hegel discusses the transition from sense certainty to perception, where the focus shifts from transient instances to the enduring thinghood of objects. This marks a significant development in cognitive processes, as perception begins to categorize and understand objects as possessing stable identities despite the flux of sensory experiences. This understanding underscores the conceptual leap from fleeting sensations to the recognition of enduring substances or things. Quote 96. The thing is in itself unity and difference, unity in difference. This statement encapsulates Hegel's complex notion of how objects are constituted. It points to a fundamental dialectical tension within objects. They are unified yet differentiated, containing diversity within their unity. This conception challenges simpler notions of objects as merely aggregates of properties and suggests a more dynamic interplay of unity and diversity, which is central to Hegel's method of advancing knowledge through dialectical reasoning. Quote 97. The analysis of perception produced unity in difference, or the unconditioned universal, as the true form of the object of knowledge, unconditioned because the unity of the thing asserts itself despite and through all delimiting conditions. In advancing the notion of the unconditioned universal, Hegel proposes that true knowledge of an object lies in understanding how its unity transcends the specific conditions of its appearances. This insight is crucial for grasping the deeper, more universal aspects of objects that do not depend on their particular empirical conditions, reflecting a significant philosophical stride towards conceptualizing objects in their essence beyond mere appearance. Quote 98. It is the nature of the content, and that alone, which lives and progresses in philosophic cognition, and at the same time, it is the inner reflection of the content which posits and originates its determinations. This quote from Hegel's Science of Logic highlights the central role of content in shaping philosophical cognition. Unlike traditional logic, which emphasizes form over content, Hegel argues that the nature of content itself drives philosophical thought, reflecting his broader methodological shift toward a dynamic, reality-based approach in philosophy. This underscores his belief that true philosophical inquiry is deeply intertwined with the content it seeks to understand, making it a living, evolving process. Quote 99. What is self-contradictory resolves itself not into nullity, into abstract nothingness, but essentially only into the negation of its particular content. Hegel describes how contradictions inherent in concepts or entities do not lead to their annihilation, but rather to the transformation of their specific content. This process is fundamental to dialectical reasoning, where contradictions are seen not as fatal flaws, but as drivers of development and change, leading to higher levels of understanding or states of being. This reflects Hegel's view of reality as a dynamic process characterized by continual synthesis of opposing elements. Quote 100. Every human individual, though infinitely unique, is so only because he belongs to the class of man. Every animal only because it belongs to the class of animal. Hegel asserts the primacy of universal categories such as man or animal in defining individual identities. This statement encapsulates his philosophy of universals, where individual existence is understood as a manifestation of a broader, defining universal category. It challenges the notion of isolated individuality by placing individuals within the context of their broader universal characteristics, which define and give meaning to their particularities. Quote 101. The logical form of the universal is the notion. Here, Hegel connects the concept of the universal directly with the notion, asserting that the true essence, or the notion of things, is where their universality resides. This highlights his approach to understanding concepts not just as abstract universals, but as dynamic, living essences that actively shape and define reality. This perspective is integral to his dialectical method, where the development of notions is seen as a reflection of the development of reality itself. Quote 102. Something preserves itself throughout this flux, something that passes into other things, but also stands against them as a being for itself. Hegel describes the complex process of development and identity retention within the flux of change. Despite the continuous change of qualities, there is an underlying persistence that allows something to maintain its essence while interacting and transforming through its relationships with others. This highlights a foundational aspect of Hegel's dialectical method, where identity is not static, but is preserved and redefined through the dynamics of change and opposition. Quote 103. It is the negation of the negation. This quote succinctly captures Hegel's dialectical method, where the resolution of contradictions is key to development. The first negation represents the conflict or difference, and the second negation is the reconciliation of this conflict that integrates the differences into a new synthesis. This process is fundamental in understanding Hegel's approach to the development of concepts and reality, emphasizing transformation through resolving inherent contradictions. Quote 104. Something is in itself insofar as it has returned to itself from being for other. Here, Hegel discusses the concept of being for self, where something achieves its essence not merely by existing in relation to others, but by integrating these external relationships back into its own identity. This reflects the process where external influences and interactions contribute to defining an entity's nature. But its true essence is realized when these influences are reconciled with its inherent characteristics. Quote 105. The unity of a thing may develop. In this statement, Hegel explores how the unity or essence of a thing is not a static property, but a developmental process influenced by its interactions and contradictions with other entities. This development is guided by the thing's inherent potentialities, which drive the transformation and realization of its essence through continuous interactions with its environment and otherness. This perspective underlines the dynamic and interconnected nature of reality as perceived through dialectical philosophy. Quote 106. The doctrine of essence seeks to liberate knowledge from the worship of observable facts and from the scientific common sense that imposes this worship. This quote emphasizes Hegel's critique of an overly empirical approach that focuses strictly on observable facts without considering their deeper implications or the processes that underlie them. He advocates for a shift towards a more conceptual and dialectical approach in philosophy, which probes beyond surface appearances to grasp the underlying essence and dynamics of reality. Quote 107. Everything, it is said, has an essence. That is, things really are not what they immediately show themselves. Hegel underscores the distinction between appearance and essence, arguing that the true nature of things lies not in what they outwardly display, but in their underlying essence. This philosophical standpoint challenges the observer to look beyond immediate perceptions and engage in a deeper, more reflective analysis to understand the fundamental realities that govern phenomena. Quote 108. Essence denotes the unity of being, its identity throughout change. In this statement, Hegel defines essence as the enduring unity and identity that persists through change, reflecting his dynamic view of reality where change is constant, but a deeper continuity remains intact. This concept of essence as both changing and constant highlights the dialectical nature of reality, where opposites coexist and interact to form a cohesive whole. Quote 109. All things are contradictory in themselves. This proposition, which so sharply differs from the traditional laws of identity and contradiction, expresses for Hegel the truth and essence of things. Here, Hegel challenges traditional logic by asserting that contradiction is inherent in all things, which is a fundamental departure from the laws of non-contradiction that typically govern logical thought. This perspective forms the core of his dialectical method, where contradiction is not just a logical error, but a vital element of the truth and reality of objects and concepts, driving their development and transformation. Quote 110. The task of abstraction consists in the transcendence and reduction of reality, as from mere appearance to the essential, which manifests itself in the notion only. This quote highlights Hegel's philosophical approach to abstraction, which he views as a process of transcending the mere appearance of things to reach their essential nature. Unlike simpler forms of abstraction in mathematics or natural sciences, which often stop at generalization, Hegel's abstraction aims to uncover the deeper essence of reality that manifests only in the notion, his conceptual framework for understanding the dynamics and interconnectedness of reality. Quote 111. Philosophy is not meant to be a narrative of what happens, but a cognition of what is true in happenings, and out of the body of truth it has to comprehend that which in the narrative appears as mere happening. Hegel distinguishes philosophy from mere historical or empirical recording, emphasizing its role in discerning the deeper truth underlying events. Philosophy, in his view, should go beyond describing occurrences to analyze and interpret the fundamental truths they reflect. This approach aligns with his dialectical method, which seeks to understand phenomena not just as isolated events, but as expressions of underlying philosophical principles. Quote 112. The dialectical method derives all concrete determinations from one comprehensive principle, which is the principle of the actual development of the subject matter itself. Here, Hegel explains the core of his dialectical method, which bases all developments and specific occurrences on a unified principle that reflects the inherent nature and evolution of the subject matter. This principle isn't static, but is itself a dynamic, evolving concept that encompasses and drives the progression of all related phenomena. In this way, Hegel's philosophy seeks to reveal the interconnections and unfolding logic within the entirety of a subject matter. Quote 113. The notion presents an objective totality in which every particular moment appears as the self-differentiation of the universal, the principle that governs the totality, and is therefore itself universal. This quote underscores Hegel's view that each particular instance or moment within a system is a manifestation of the system's overarching principle or universal. This means that each element is both a product of and a contributor to the whole, reflecting the system's intrinsic logic and interdependent nature. In Hegel's system, the universal is not merely a backdrop, but actively shapes and is shaped by its particular instances, illustrating his complex understanding of totality and differentiation within philosophical systems. Quote 114. Napoleon was the soul of the world, in whom the universal task of the time was embodied. That task was to consolidate and preserve the new form of society that stood for the principle of reason. This quote reflects Hegel's perception of Napoleon as a historical figure who embodied the zeitgeist, turning the revolutionary upheavals of 1789 into a stable state system that aimed to balance individual freedom with universal reason. Hegel admired Napoleon not for his personal qualities, but for his role in realizing a rational social order, an aspect he considered crucial for the development of society according to the principles of reason. Quote 115. The sovereignty of the state is the one principle that would bring unity. Hegel posits the sovereignty of the state as the solution to the chaos and competitive individualism of his time. In his view, a strong sovereign state could harmonize conflicting individual interests by subsuming them under a universal rational order. This perspective aligns with his broader philosophy, which holds that individual freedom must be integrated into an orderly and rational state framework to be meaningful and effective. Quote 116. Truly, this was a strange attitude. The political philosopher who but 1 year later became the official ideological spokesman for the Prussian state, and then declared the state's right to be the right of reason itself, now denounces political activity and interprets national liberation to mean freedom for philosophical scholarship. This excerpt highlights the apparent contradictions in Hegel's attitudes towards politics and the state. Initially skeptical of political activity and nationalistic fervor, he later embraced the role of a state philosopher in Prussia, advocating for a strong state as the embodiment of rationality. This shift underscores the complexity of his thought and the tensions between his philosophical ideals and the practical realities of state power. Quote 117. The state is separate from society. Hegel's assertion that the state stands apart from and above society encapsulates his belief in the state as a higher rational authority capable of regulating and directing social interests towards a common good. This separation underscores his view of the state not merely as an aggregator of individual interests, but as an objective entity with the capacity to shape and define the ethical life of its citizens, guiding society according to rational principles. Quote 118. the task of philosophy becomes that of reconciling men to the actual. This quote captures Hegel's view that philosophy should help individuals come to terms with their existing social and political conditions, rather than promoting idealistic or utopian alternatives. Hegel believed that recognizing and understanding the real conditions of society is essential for philosophy, suggesting a pragmatic approach where the ideal blends with the actual to foster a more grounded and achievable conception of social progress. Quote 119. There is hardly another philosophical work that reveals more unsparingly the irreconcilable contradictions of modern society, or that seems more perversely to acquiesce in them. Hegel's philosophical work is portrayed as acutely aware of the deep contradictions within modern society, yet it also appears to accept these contradictions as inevitable. This acceptance is not due to a lack of insight, but stems from Hegel's belief in the complexities of reality, where philosophical ideals must confront and coexist with less than ideal social conditions. His work reflects a tension between critical analysis and pragmatic acceptance, suggesting a nuanced understanding of the challenges of realizing philosophical ideals in the practical world. Quote 120. The philosophy of right is the philosophy of middle-class society come to full self-consciousness. This quote highlights Hegel's understanding of his own work as the culmination of middle-class society's intellectual and philosophical development. In Hegel's view, the philosophy of right articulates and rationalizes the values, structures, and contradictions of bourgeois society, serving as both a reflection of its time and a critical engagement with the social order. It suggests that Hegel saw his work as capturing the essence of the social and economic dynamics of his era, presenting a systematic and self-aware philosophical interpretation of modern society's principles and problems. Quote 121. Fraud and crime are an unpremeditated or civil wrong, unbefangens oder bürgerliches Unrecht, denoting that they are a material part of civil society. This quote illustrates Hegel's view that wrongdoings such as fraud and crime are not aberrations, but inherent elements of civil society, arising naturally from the interactions within it. Hegel posits that these acts stem from the individual pursuit of personal interests, which, when conflicting with the interests of others, result in civil wrongs. This perspective underscores his broader philosophical stance that society's structure inevitably gives rise to conflicts that are both unintended and unavoidable, due to the very nature of individual rights and property relations within a competitive economic system. Quote 122. The right of the whole and that of the individual do not have the same validity. Hegel distinguishes between the rights of the individual and the collective rights of society, asserting that the latter holds higher authority because it encompasses the well-being of the collective, upon which individual welfare ultimately depends. This notion supports his argument that individual actions that conflict with societal laws are not only detrimental to society, but also counter to the individual's own interests. Hegel's theory suggests that true justice restores the balance by aligning individual actions with the universal rights, reinforcing his belief in the state's role in mediating and rectifying these conflicts. Quote 123. The free will, the actual motor of reason in society, necessarily creates wrong. Here, Hegel argues that free will, while a driving force of reason and progress in society, invariably leads to wrongful acts due to the inherent conflicts between individual interests and the collective good. This paradox highlights the complex interplay between freedom and morality within civil society, suggesting that freedom, when exercised without regard to universal principles, leads to actions that undermine the very framework that permits such freedom. Quote 124. The police is supposed to represent the interest of the whole against social forces that are not too weak but too strong to guarantee an undisturbed functioning of the social and economic process. Hegel's concept of the police reflects a nuanced understanding of its role within society, transcending the traditional notion of merely maintaining law and order. He suggests that the police are crucial in managing the balance of power within civil society, especially when certain social and economic forces become so dominant that they threaten the stability and functionality of the entire system. This role indicates a deeper, systemic function of the police in preserving the social order beyond simple enforcement, aligning it with the broader interests of societal harmony and stability. Quote 125. By means of its own dialectic, the civil society is driven beyond its own limits as a definite and self-complete society. This quote captures Hegel's dynamic view of civil society as inherently unstable and constantly evolving beyond its established limits. He argues that civil society, through its internal contradictions and the dialectical processes these contradictions initiate, is compelled to transcend itself. This process of transcending is driven by the need to resolve these contradictions, leading to changes that push society towards new forms of organization and higher levels of complexity. This perspective highlights Hegel's belief in the progressive, though often chaotic, nature of social change. Quote 126. The labor of all will be subject to administrative regulation. Hegel envisions a scenario where the state's administrative powers become extensive enough to regulate all aspects of labor within society. This reflects his broader conception of a strong, centralized state that intervenes directly in the economy to manage and stabilize it. Hegel sees this level of state intervention as necessary to mitigate the disruptions and upheavals that characterize unregulated civil society, suggesting a move towards a more managed and orderly economic system. Quote 127. Reason is the sovereign of the world. This, according to Hegel, is a hypothesis, and the only hypothesis in the philosophy of history. Hegel posits that reason, rather than mere accumulation of events or the actions of great men, drives the progress and dynamics of history. This hypothesis forms the basis of his philosophy of history, asserting that the underlying logical processes, rather than random occurrences, shape the world. This perspective allows Hegel to analyze historical events as manifestations of reason's development over time, providing a more structured and philosophical interpretation of history's course. Quote 128. We have to take history as it is. We must proceed historically, empirically. Despite his philosophical framework, Hegel emphasizes the importance of empirical evidence in studying history. This statement reflects a commitment to a grounded approach in historical study, where even a philosopher must align theories with the actual data. Hegel's insistence on empirical analysis underpins his belief that while philosophy can guide historical understanding, it must not stray from the realities that the evidence presents. Quote 129. The philosophy of history expounds the historical content of reason. Here, Hegel links the logical structure he explored in his dialectics with the actual content of world history, suggesting that the logical processes inherent in reason are mirrored in historical developments. This view positions history as a rational process, where each event or era contributes to the unfolding of reason, aligning historical progression with a broader philosophical narrative about the development of human consciousness and society. Quote 130. Each particular national genius is to be treated as only one individual in the process of universal history. Hegel emphasizes the notion that each nation's historical trajectory contributes to the overarching narrative of universal history, much like chapters in a larger story. He views each national identity, or Volksgeist, as manifesting a specific stage of the world's philosophical development, contributing uniquely to the progress of human freedom and rationality. This perspective underscores Hegel's belief that the history of any single nation cannot be fully understood in isolation, but must be contextualized within the broader sweep of world history to appreciate its role in the evolution of human consciousness and societal structures. Quote 131. Freedom does not and cannot mean the same thing in the different periods of history. For in each period, one type of freedom is the true one. This quote reflects Hegel's dynamic view of freedom, suggesting that its definition and the conditions for its realization vary significantly across different historical epochs. Hegel argues that each period in history conceptualizes and prioritizes different aspects of freedom based on its unique cultural, social, and political conditions. This adaptability in the concept of freedom is crucial for understanding Hegel's historical dialectic, where each epoch not only resolves contradictions from the past, but also sets the stage for new forms of freedom and conflict that propel historical progression. Quote 132. The transition from philosophy to the domain of state and society had been an intrinsic part of Hegel's system. This quote encapsulates Hegel's philosophical approach, which seamlessly integrates his metaphysical concepts with practical issues of state and society. Hegel believed that philosophical ideas must not exist in isolation, but should actively inform and be reflected in the structures and practices of societal and political institutions. This perspective marks a crucial development in philosophical thought, where abstract theory is directly applied to understand and shape real-world conditions, particularly in the realms of governance and social organization. Quote 133. Philosophy had in this way devolved upon social theory. Hegel's philosophy set the stage for the emergence of social theory as a distinct field of inquiry. This transition highlights how Hegelian philosophy, particularly his dialectics, influenced subsequent intellectual movements by providing a framework for analyzing and critiquing the social and political structures of the time. The development of social theory from Hegelian philosophy indicates a shift towards a more empirically engaged and critically oriented approach to understanding human societies and their historical development. Quote 134. The state must be built on the acknowledgement of this freedom. In this assertion, Hegel emphasizes the foundational role that the concept of freedom plays in the structure and legitimacy of the state. For Hegel, a state that recognizes and enshrines freedom is not only fulfilling a moral imperative, but also aligning itself with the rational progress of history. This idea reflects his belief in a historical dialectic, where each stage of societal development brings humanity closer to realizing true freedom, which is both a philosophical ideal and a practical goal for statecraft. Quote 135. The transition from Hegel to Marx is, in all respects, a transition to an essentially different order of truth, not to be interpreted in terms of philosophy. This statement marks a fundamental shift in the understanding of societal structures and their historical development, moving from a purely philosophical discourse to a critique based on social and economic realities. Marx's approach diverges radically from Hegel's by grounding theory in the material conditions of society, emphasizing the economic underpinnings of social relations and the dynamics of class struggle. This reorientation rejects traditional philosophical categories, insisting instead on a practical empirical analysis of societal conditions as they relate to economic forces and class relations. Quote 136. Marx's theory is a critique in the sense that all concepts are an indictment of the totality of the existing order. This quote captures the essence of Marxian critique as fundamentally oppositional and transformative, aiming not just to understand the world, but to change it. Marx's critique of society is rooted in a comprehensive analysis of economic structures and class dynamics, aiming to reveal the contradictions and injustices inherent in capitalist societies. This approach positions all sociopolitical and economic phenomena as interlinked within the larger system, which must be overthrown or radically transformed to resolve these contradictions and achieve a just society. Reason and Revolution, Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory, by Herbert Marcuse, concludes by reaffirming the importance of Hegel's dialectical method in understanding modern social developments and the conditions for true human freedom. Marcuse shows that the rational potential inherent in Hegel's thought serves as a critical tool for confronting both the failures of liberalism and the dangers of fascism. The book underscores the relevance of Hegelian theory to the ongoing struggle for a liberated society, where rationality can guide social transformation, not toward domination, but toward the realization of freedom and human potential.
Curious to dive into the mind of Herbert Marcuse? With StudyLab Pro's book GPT, it's possible. Ask questions, explore themes, and discover the depths of Reason and Revolution, Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory, in an entirely new way. Start your conversation now by clicking on our logo. And if you're hungry for more educational content, subscribe to our channel to keep discovering, learning, and growing. Want more than just videos? Click on our logo now to join us on our platform for multiple choice tests, in-depth content, and tools to help you ace your studies. Get started now.